Come on.
I'm playing with magnets.
Are we good?
Well, that is to be determined, but you may start.
Welcome everyone today. Here we are.
Are we good? Are we good to go?
Take one.
Take one, yes.
I can take 3.
Perfect. Well, if you're watching this today, happy Father's Day, and it is Father's Day, and we were sitting around celebrating Father's Day, and Bobby thought it would be a good idea to share some fishing stories, and you know what, why not? I got 3 generations of Chapmans here. I got my dad, Ron, my little son, Mason here, and me, of course, and you know, if you guys have followed along, you know we are a fishing family, and I owe fishing family to this guy right here for the one who inspired it, and me taking it to another level, and Mason taking it to another level. So
Mason looks like Seinfeld right now.
Seinfeld, he does. He kind of has a Seinfeld hair look. So if you Seinfeld fans out there, here you go. We'll call him Seinfeld. But you know, Bobby thought sharing fishing stories, and I guess before we get into fishing stories, so think of your best fishing stories. Just some things. So here's my dad who taught me how to fish. Dad was, he wasn't a tournament fisherman. You were a weekend angler more. And then,
Well, I literally fished all the time I could. We would fish
But
after school.
for anything.
Weekends, yeah.
I mean, you weren't necessarily
Yeah.
a bass fisherman. You just
No.
fished for whatever.
No.
Then I was the one who witnessed a bass tournament, and he taught me the love of fishing. I witnessed a bass tournament and took it to a whole nother level. Lo and behold, here's this guy. Before he could hardly walk, he was in the boat with me and fishing with me, and traveled the country and was homeschooled around the country and grew up in the tournament world. And now the neat thing for Mason is at 20 years old, he's leaving in August for Japan to go to college. But also what has brought his fascination to go to Japan to go to college is his fascination with the Japanese side of fishing. So if anybody follows the Japanese side of it, you know, you can understand why Mason is fascinated with that side of it as well. So I guess with that being said, maybe we start youngest first. What's a fishing memory that comes to mind?
Just some of your favorite
Fishing.
stories or fishing memories.
Yes.
that you've done together.
So one that I have that I remember, it's not necessarily the fishing part, but more the overarching thing, but it was back in 2012 when you won Angler of the Year. Me and Papa, we were hanging out at the campground, walking out to the marina, and we found a white Rico pop floating there, and we went out and we caught a couple small view, and then I've now had it for 12 years and caught thousands of fish on it, and decided last week to go and retire it because of all that.
Interesting. That's the first I've ever heard of that part of the story. So I might have to see this bait, and it might have to be put back into production. But so what? Was this when I won Angler of the Year
Yeah,
in
this
New
was
York?
your last day of competition.
In New York, the campground at what would have been Oneida.
Oneida.
So you guys found that, and yeah, that was a neat memory, because that was the tournament where I was either going to win or lose Angler of the Year. I was leading it, and so the kids were obviously with us, but my parents came up, my sister and her family. So you guys, I didn't know you did all that, so that's pretty cool. But I remember the family rented a big house and hung out, and thankfully we got to celebrate me winning Angler of the Year. So pretty cool. What about you? Fishing memory? What fishing memory?
Well, I go back, and you know, the fishing part of it wasn't such the big a deal for me as just being able to do stuff with Brent. And this was early on, and probably our first, you know, fishing events was at Lacine down at the power plant. And we would go down there and catch wiper and bass and all that. Have to walk a half a mile to get to a
This
place
was back
to fish.
before we even had a boat. Yes, we would
Yeah, that was
walk
before we had a boat. So.
down the long levee to
Yeah.
go down there and fish. And what's funny is if you fast forward now 40, 50 years, is Lacine, where we grew up fishing, it's this discharge. and we would literally stand on the cement walls where the water would discharge into the lake. We would stand on those walls, and I remember holding a crankbait on a flipping stick and just holding it in the current and catching fish. Now, unfortunately, due to some tragic accidents, people have drowned in there. Their boats have gotten caught up in the white water. People fall, and now you can't even get close to fishing there. But yeah, he used to take me, and we would walk all the way down there. We would fish from the shore. You know, that brings up a story. I remember, you know, early on, before we were really tournament fishermen, he taught me. This is what the neat thing about you teaching me is you taught me a lot of the basics. We were live bait fishermen well before we ever fished with lures. But the thing is, fishing with live bait, I know how a shiner acts in the water. I know what a night crawler does in the water. I know what a crawfish does in the water. So then I know how to make that bait, that lure, act in the water to mimic those type of baits. But him and I, we would fish with live night crawlers, and we're fishing at Lacine, and we would throw live night crawlers out, and we would literally drift them in the current. And when the bass bit it, we would let it swim for like 30 seconds to make sure it had ate that night crawler all the way before we set the hook. So I remember him and I were drifting live night crawlers in there, and I don't remember even who detected the first bite, but one of us got a bite. So we're letting them swim with our live night crawlers so they'd make sure they ate it well. And so we're both talking about how we got these fish. So we set the hook basically at the same time, and we're fighting this fish in, and lo and behold, as it gets closer, we're fighting the same fish. We had literally both caught probably more like a 3-pound bass. I was going to say a 4-pound
Yeah,
bass,
probably.
but probably a 3-pound bass that had ate your night crawler and my night crawler, and probably had both of them swallowed down its throat. And but we caught the same fish on the same night crawler. And you know, back in the day, it didn't matter to us, because guess where that fish went? It went right in the cooler and went home. But that's what you did, you know, back 40 years ago and all that. So things have definitely changed, and since then I remember getting a you know, we had the little tracker aluminum boat.
Yeah.
And then we got our first bass boat, the Cajun with the 150 on it. Same thing at Lacine Lake. We're running this bass boat down the lake, and we decided to run through the coots. And if you've ever ran a bass boat through coots before running trackers through, that was a big eye opener when you own a bass boat. And another thing I remember in that same boat at Lacine was first time navigating big water and spearing a wave, and that was an eye opener as a boat owner. What about you, Mason? What that was well before your time.
Your first boat owner experience?
Yeah.
Well, let's see.
Yeah.
I bought the boat around December probably, and spent about a month getting it ready, and went down to Florida to go and fish some
Hold on,
BFLs.
I got to preface this with buying a used boat. There's the acronym: break out another 1,000 if you own a new boat
We
or a
learned
used
that
boat.
very quickly.
So Mason learned that very quickly when he bought a used boat. So
But I took it down, I put it on Harris chain, and I got a mile up the lake, and my engine went. So I troll motored all the way back and got it into the shop, and to quote the mechanics, they said, "You've made a viewport in the side of your power head," and that
Perfect.
Boat owner 101.
So your
Boat
boat,
owner
your
101.
boat ownership as your first tournament, he went to Florida to fish BFLs, and his first tournament I helped him get all the way to Florida, and his first hour of practice for this tournament was a blown power head. How much? $8,000 later? $8,000 later, scrambling with him, bringing their bay boat over for him to practice out of, got it fixed, and an absolute crazy nightmare
And
there.
they canceled the tournament after that too because of cold.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yes, you did all this stuff, got it prepared. The
I was
boat,
out until 10 o'clock the night before breaking
the
it
boat
in.
got
after talking to
fixed
the-
on
talking
Friday,
to the
and
director,
then they
and-
canceled the tournament.
Oh,
So
yeah, that's right. I forgot about that.
Yeah.
that's a good one. But yeah, no, I mean, you know, just talk about, you know, Dad taking me fishing. You know, I look back now of a lot of bass fishing, and I kind of view it as my job. But if you follow along, you know we're very passionate about saltwater fishing, and we spent a lot of time in Florida. We still spend a lot of time in Florida, but I'll never forget we'd go, and definitely a different time and day. Him and I, we would get up in the morning before daylight. We would go fish below the bridge at Fort Myers Beach,
How
and
old were you?
oh, I was 10, 12 years old.
Well,
And he would fish
younger
with
than
me
that.
for a few hours in the morning, and then they'd leave me up there all day long under the fishing pier with all the homeless people and the local drunks and all that. And I'd
This was
hang
before
out
cell phones.
before cell phones. They might come and check on me at lunchtime, but what was pretty cool is I became friends with. There was a charter boat underneath there that they would come in the evenings, and I got to know those people so well. They'd let me fish off the dock, and got to know them so well because I was this strange kid that would go out on the charter boat, and I would volunteer to pick out the backlashes out of all their party boat reels and stuff, and they started letting me go out on the boat for free, and so stuff like memories like that. But the one that really comes to mind in Florida, this is a true story. We could probably find the picture of it, but him and I were fishing in the surf one morning. We decided not to go down to the pier. We decided to fish in the surf, and you haven't changed much in size since 30, 40 years ago, probably 40 years ago now. We're in the surf, and I'm probably about this tall at the time, but I'm in waist deep water, maybe chest. You're probably in waist deep water. I'm in chest deep water, and we're out there throwing in the surf, and it's pretty calm. If you've been in the Gulf of Mexico, you get the right morning, it's calm. And I'll never forget, we're throwing out there, and we'd catch trout every once in a while, or ladyfish or whatever. And I look down, and there's a shark circling us with his little fin up, just swimming around us.
Blacktip.
Little blacktip shark. And I took my little jig, I reeled it in, I just stuck it out with this much line out. I shook it in front of this shark. He swam over and ate it, and proceeded to take out probably 50 yards of line, jumping, going crazy, and got this shark in. So that was a pretty cool memory too.
And we actually filleted it right there on the beach. And people didn't like that because they didn't want to know there were sharks in the water out there. So.
Guess what? Just if you're planning a family vacation and you're headed to the beach somewhere, there are sharks swimming around. So just be conscientious of that, but don't be afraid of them. You can get out there, have fun, and you can catch them as well. So
I've got to tell you though, where Brent first decided he was going to tournament fish is we were at Melbourne Lake, and we were crappie fishing, and we were tied up to this brush pile, and these bass fishermen came in on the other side of the brush pile, and they said, "Hey, we've been catching bass out of this brush pile. Do you care if we fish here?" And we said no. And the guy pitches a jig in there and pulls a bass out, and I think they caught a couple bass out of that brush pile. And this is where Brent said, "That's what I want to do. That's what I want to do."
well, I remember too, we went in and saw our first weigh-in too.
Yeah, and we went in.
And it was probably a bass club at the time.
Yeah.
Weighing in at Melbourne Lake, which back then, Melbourne Lake was a dirty lake, and it had some largemouth in it, but it had a lot of standing timber. You fast forward to now, all you younger generation know Melbourne Lake now has zebra mussels in it, and a smallmouth bass was not existent in the Midwest, and now it's got more smallmouth than it does largemouth. But yes, I saw my first weigh-in at Melbourne Lake, and that's, between watching those guys catch those fish and seeing that weigh-in, that's what kind of sucked me in.
And that's when we joined the Shawnee Mission Bassmasters.
Yep, that's when we joined a bass club, was a year or two later, and fast forward 40 some years now, and 30 years of doing it professionally is where we're at. And
probably my most memorable time, one of my most memorable times of fishing with Brent is back when he would fish in BASS, and they fished co-anglers. And I always fished the tournaments, the ones I could, and if you fish the tournament as a co-angler, you could fish with a pro. So I fished all the practices.
With us,
I got to fish all the practices with Brent. And so that's where I learned how to take my bass fishing skills to the next level.
Well, and then you fish some of the opens as a boater
I
too,
fished some of the
but
opens
then,
on the pro side. So
unfortunately, when Mason got to the age where he could do it, he could travel with us, but it got to the point where we couldn't have anybody practice with us. So Mason didn't get to practice for the tournaments so much for me right beforehand, but we would go pre-practice somewhere. But the one thing I remember too with Mason, he was younger than he should have been at the time, when he's like, "Dad, I'm tired of this push button. I want to learn how to throw a bait caster like you do." And I'm like, at the time, it was like, you don't want to take a kid out bass fishing and expect them to throw a bait caster. So I was going to be fishing that week, so I rigged up a bait caster for him in the campground and put some heavier line than usual, a heavier bait on it than usual, and got it dialed in. I said, I'll tell you what, you practice this week with this bait caster, and when you get good enough with it, then we'll take you out in the boat and you can actually bass fish it with them. You can bass fish with it. And lo and behold, we were at Lake Guntersville for that tournament. And it was when chatterbaits were really, really new. I wish I'd have known now what I'd known then, what I know now. But I remember taking him out to Guntersville after the tournament, and I probably didn't catch a big fish the entire week. And I take him out there, and it's like his first few hours throwing a bait caster. I put a chatterbait on for him, and he's out there just kind of doing these not very far casts for the bait caster at the time, and goes out and catches like a 5.5 pounder. So, you know, that was one that was definitely pretty memorable as well.
Always catching those big fish.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, so let's talk about Papa and Mason fishing co-angler stuff together and traveling together.
Yep.
Especially when we couldn't, and Mason was too young to go on his own.
Yep. Yeah, they both fished as co-anglers.
That's the question to them.
Oh, well, yeah.
There.
Well, I mean, I'm just prefacing. Yes, they fished the Toyota series where Mason was still, what, 16 at the time? Where
I
he
think
could
16 was my
barely
first
lead.
year
So,
I did.
yes, so they went and fished a couple divisions as co-anglers in the Toyota series, because you still, you know, not having a boat, you still like to go as a co-angler and still compete in the tournaments, and it was a good learning experience for Mason as well.
I think, was it the first year you fished as a co-angler, you won Angler of the Year?
Second.
No, that was the third year.
Third year.
He made the championship the first year.
I
Yeah.
had championship my first
Yeah.
year, and that was
But he finished.
when we had where Mimi hit the deer on the way home from
Oh, yeah,
Table Rock,
yeah.
and that was
There's another story.
Yeah.
My mother hit a deer on November 7th when her son was at home deer hunting, and I told my mother, I said, Mom, it's the busiest day of the year for deer being hit on the roads. I was traveling back and forth to our farm, almost hitting deer every night and watching deer get hit. And lo and behold, a few hours after I told her that, she drove home, because she was with them, drove home separately, and
She
she's
was
not an
ahead of
hour
us.
on the road, and she calls and she's totaled her car out. So that was a scary
was
memory, but luckily
stressful.
everything turned out
Hit a
very,
deer
very
going 75 miles an hour.
That was some.
driving home from Table Rock.
And we
so.
called Brent, and the first thing Brent asked me, did you get the head?
Well, heck yeah,
for
if she's gonna,
context. The
But
antlers
it was
were
a
like
big buck. So.
dust.
yes. Well, I mean, you know, if she's gonna hit a big buck, you might as well try to
Yeah,
salvage the
so-
head off of it.
Okay,
So.
Mason, favorite smallmouth trip? Or
Up north.
I mean, it would have to be probably the first time that we went to Ontario.
Yeah.
We went out to the islands out there. That
Yeah.
was
That's where we all fished that day.
that's where we all fished. Yeah.
And they were hitting topwater and stuff.
No, that was where we were. drop
Oh,
shot.
yeah.
But yeah,
Okay.
we had that trip when we went going from New York
that was
over
a
to
good one too,
Maine,
though.
and we stopped somewhere in New
Yeah.
Hampshire, and they were eating grasshoppers. There was grasshoppers all over the surface, and who kept saying all day long we needed to be throwing topwater?
the know-it-all?
Well, you'd catch a smallmouth, and
I-
that,
That's what
Yeah, we would catch a smallmouth and they would spit up grasshoppers.
spit
And
up
I
grasshoppers.
kept saying we need to throw topwater. And finally, with like 2 hours left in the day, I think I put on a walking bait, or maybe you did, and caught a couple smallmouth on a walking bait. And I said, I bet a pop R type bait would be the deal. And
That's what we turned
the
out.
last hour, put on a pop R, and it didn't matter where you threw. You could throw it in 30 feet of water. You'd let it sit there. You'd pop it once or twice and catch a 2 to 3 pound smallmouth, and every one of them was spitting up grasshoppers.
Yeah.
So
And
that
that's
was
just when we were road tripping between.
yes. That's when we were traveling in our camper. My parents would come and follow us around and tour around. So wow,
that's,
that was a fun one.
That's one thing about Brent fishing tournaments and Mimi and I being able to travel is that I was able, I fished a lot of lakes I never would have fished in my life. Clear Lake,
And
out in California, the
homeschooling our
Delta,
children.
you know, Lake Champlain, Lake Erie. I never
Oh,
would have
so
fished
I
all
gotta
that.
tell the fans another story that I remember. So this was Mason was what, maybe 6, 8 years old at the time. It's back when the Jones used to camp as well. We're in California at Clear Lake, and we're all camping. And the Jones were camping also. They had their big motor home, and there was Little Alton. I always call Alton Jones Little Alton. Little Alton and Mason were fishing together, and we are out there, and you guys got what, like live shiners or something?
I think
didn't
we
you?
had shiners or something.
And they end up
some sort
catching a
line
bunch
bait.
of big bass off the dock at the campground we were staying at. But you remember that one,
I
don't
remember
you?
that one. We caught some big ones.
Yeah, exactly. So definitely some memories. But now, I guess for the three of us fishing now, if you follow along, we're into saltwater fishing. We got the saltwater boat, and if it works out schedule-wise, we try to get a trip down to their place in Florida, and
Which we're going to next month.
so be sure to stay tuned and watch, because hopefully we're gonna have some cool videos there. But now, I think the thing that we all look forward to is the big adventures of going offshore and trying to see what we can catch there. But I think that's a team effort, and Mason, the things that he's learned and taught us in the saltwater world and all the new crazy techniques, it's awesome. And at the end of the day, we get to eat
Well,
well.
one of the things I remember about Mason and saltwater fishing is a neighbor down in Florida took us out in his contender.
First
and
time
we're-
we got to go offshore fishing. with
And we're
somebody.
offshore fishing. We're over there with our bait, our shrimp and our squid and all that. Well, Mason's on the other side of the boat, and he's standing over there with a rod, and he's jigging it up and down like this, fast.
No, let me
we're
do it
looking
better.
over.
He's not doing that. Mason at the time is about this tall, and the side of a center console is about here.
It was about up to here.
Mason, I
on the
look
side of the boat.
over, and he is doing this. He is reeling as fast as he can reel, and he's jumping up and down. And the guy in the boat with us is looking at me like, "What is wrong with your son?"
What is he?
And yeah, what did he do?
And then all of a sudden, wham!
On the second drop, his first drop he didn't get bit. The second drop,
Yeah, he hooks a giant fish, and he fights it, gets it in, and it's an amberjack, a big amberjack.
nice amberjack.
And that, for us, changed our way of fishing.
No, it was the next drop that changed. it.
Well, the next,
The
Yeah.
first catch we
Yeah.
thought was kind of a fluke. What
Yeah.
happened on the second drop?
yeah,
I caught a double on the second drop.
yeah.
Then you saw three grown men running around the boat stealing all his extra baits.
All my
to,
Christmas presents.
Yeah, because he wanted all this crazy speed jigging stuff for saltwater fishing that I thought was kind of a gimmick. And lo and behold, him watching YouTube videos and
Me watching
teaching
my
us.
my Japanese YouTube videos that I
Yeah.
couldn't understand, and
So there's
that's
Mason's
a big part of what started where I am now.
Mason's
was-
fascination with the Japanese side of it. He couldn't understand them, but he just would watch what they were doing fishing wise. And I think that's what's neat about fishing in general is there's fishermen all around the world and a passion for fishing, and we may not be able to communicate through the right language, but just the love of fishing even can do that as well. And that's how you've learned, and now that's why you're taking Japanese and teaching us stuff about the Japanese and all that as well. So
Yeah, we've had some amazing saltwater trips, and it's funny because we've got a 30-foot boat now, but I also before that had a 19-foot bay boat. And we would take that bay boat out 30 miles out, and we'd fish out of it. I think we had 6 people in that one time,
I think so. Probably
with Patrick
6.
and all.
yeah.
We had 6 people on that out fishing in that. I know Mason and I was out one time, and we'd come in, we stopped at the marina to get gas, and the guy said, "Did you guys do any good?" And I said, "Yeah, we caught some pretty good fish." He said, "Where'd you go?" I said, "We went out to the boxcar," which was about 25 miles out.
About 20.
And he looks down at this boat and he goes, "In that?" And I said, "Yeah, we." And since then, we were out there several times. Went out to the boxcar one day, then went out to the tugboat the next day, which was tugboat's
About
another
30,
5 miles
32.
out or 10 miles.
That's what finally got the family to realize maybe we needed a bigger boat, and finally back 2 years ago we got a 30-foot center console when we were taking a 19-foot bay boat 50 miles out, and a lot of times we would go to the gas station and we'd have like a gallon of gas left. So that's me being the confident one of believing in my Mercury outboard and all the equipment to get us out there and all the safety equipment and being on the Great Lakes and a lot of big water, to having that confidence to go out there and do that. But finally realized,
Fine line with confidence.
yes, there's a fine line between confidence and what?
Yeah.
Arrogance.
So,
And oh
So-
crap, oh crap.
so finally we decided maybe a bigger boat with 2 engines.
Well,
might
we
be-
not only bought a 30-foot center console, but it was a Triton with twin 350s on it, Mercury's.
Yes, so yes, that.
And we're used to going to the gas station and filling up. And I think the bay boat held about 30 gallons of gas. So we went to the filling station to fill up the center console, the offshore
It
boat.
holds 300 gallons. Of
Yeah,
gas.
$900 later, we're about half full.
Yeah, so that's the other thing too. So.
And so we got a rude awakening about buying gas for offshore boats.
So wow, with that being said, we're almost 30 minutes in,
Yeah.
and we've only told a few fishing stories. So
That's just a few.
yeah, so we might have to do this again.
But it's hard to tell a few fishing stories because like
it's
Brent
it's
said,
never
we're a
just the
fishing
cash,
family. That's all we do is fish. So we can sit here and talk about fishing and do fishing stories for
I
5
haven't
hours.
even talked
you
about
know?
the fishing stories that I thought I was going to talk about.
But it's
So with that being said, we hope you enjoyed. We wish you the best of Father's Days. If you're there with your father, tell him thank you. If you're a new dad, get your kids out there and get them fishing. If you're, or just it's about the memories that you build with your dad or your fathers and all that. So remember that on Father's Day.
Your father figure.
Or your father figure, any of that stuff. But just remember that of when you get them out there and take them fishing, it's about creating memories, and that's what it's all about.
I got to just say one thing before we wrap it up is that when we talk about taking your kid fishing and getting him into fishing, there's one big advantage to that is that Brent never ever growing up in school, in high school, ever really got in trouble.
That he knows.
And the reason that I knew of, the reason was he knew that if he got in trouble that week, we wouldn't go fishing that weekend. And so it's a big advantage to have.
Yeah, I mean that's a big deal. I mean even that with Mason, I think you give your kids something to look forward to, and something for them to strive to do. It's going to give them a path, a direction, and hopefully keep them out of trouble. Which Mason's turned out to be a pretty good kid, and as far as I know of, he hasn't done anything that's wrong either. So, but we hope you enjoyed. Have a happy Father's Day, and thanks for tuning in.